Hello, thank you for your interest in energy medicine. My name is Katerina Kostova, and I wanted to do this quick video today to talk about what energy is, what energy medicine is, and why we should care about it. Simply put, what we know from physics is that energy is all there is. We are all a form of energy, and so is everything else around us. It is simply stored and presented in different forms and at different vibrations. Human bodies, animals, physical objects around us that we need and use on a daily basis are examples of energy that is very dense and it vibrates slowly. So it can condense into this physical matter that we can easily discern. It may be your hot cup of tea in the morning, which is a mix of chemical and thermal energy. It could be the car that gets you to work, which is an example of mechanical and motion energy at play. Those are easily discernible, and we're all familiar with those types of energies. Then there is energy such as light and sound and movement, which are not necessarily always physical, but we can still recognize them easily as being present in our lives. Think of the warmth of the sun, think of a songbird, think of a lightning bolt. That energy vibrates at a higher level, and sometimes it can be outside of the range of our perception. For example, even though we can't see ultraviolet light, we know what a sunburn is, and that's why we use sunscreen. Or, for example, if you have a heart problem, you might end up going to the doctor to get an electrocardiogram, which measures the electrical activity of the heart, which again is not an energy that we can perceive, but if it stops working, you're not going to be very alive. Finally, there is energy that vibrates so quickly and is so subtle that it tends to be mostly or completely outside of the range of our normal perceptions, such as gravity, or the subtle energies that keep our physical bodies healthy and functioning. Those energies are inherent in everything we perceive, regardless of whether our senses or any other instruments can register those energies or not. Those are the types of energies that have been explored for millennia in traditional healing methods. And those are the types of energies that we're going to talk a little bit more about today. You're probably familiar with one of the very basic concepts of traditional Chinese medicine, which is this little circle of yin and yang, which we tend to perceive as two separate halves. But they're two halves of a whole. They cannot exist without one another, and they contain each other within themselves so that they form this coherent unity. And that is where the balance of those two is. Yin energy is passive, it is dark, it is moist, cold, heavy, it is internal, it is slow, it goes inward and it goes deep. Think of the moon that reflects the glow of the sun. Think of a glass of cold milk, a turtle on the beach, the slow, constant churn of the organs that cannot afford to stop working in your body, such as the heart or the lungs or the liver or the kidneys. Yang energy, on the other hand, is very active. It is light, it is hot, it bubbles up, it's external, enthusiastic, intense, it rises to the top, and it pushes forward. Think of the sun, a glass of champagne, the drive to conquer a peak, or a sprint that forces you to push yourself to the limit. Those two energies exist because of each other. They are a constant pulse. You can't have one without the other. You can't have only yang without yin. And you can't have yin without yang. And that is why within this Chinese symbol, which you will see, that within the yin, there is a small circle of yang. And within the yang, there is a small circle of yin. Because they are the genesis of each other and they help each other stay in balance. Think of the moment just before the sun begins to rise. It is darkest at that moment. That is your deepest yin. And from that point, you start coming into the light, which is your yang. And the same thing in the opposite order occurs in the evening, where it's brightest right before the sun starts to set down, and then it plunges into darkness, which is the yin again. That rhythm is everywhere in our lives. It permeates every waking moment. We cannot go for long being incredibly active without taking some rest. And we cannot constantly be in a resting period without some activity. We're designed to have that interplay of the two, that push and pull of yin and yang, because together they form a whole, together they come into balance. And achieving that balance is what most of us are after, because that is when we feel at peace, that is when we feel healthy, that is when we feel happy, when the two are in proper relation to one another. So when you think about yin and yang in that example that I just offered of the sun and the earth, think of the sun. So let's look at our solar system. Think of the sun as that yang force within our solar system. It is bright, it is light, it sends all these positively charged particles over to our earth. Our earth, on the other hand, is more yin. It is more receptive, it is cooler, it is more dense, and it is that yin force within the system that has more of a negatively charged surface. So you have a yang and a yin, and those two interact all the time. And that interaction is gravity. It's what suspends us on this earth between that negative charge of the earth and that positive charge of the sun. And it allows us to be present in a way that aligns all of our energy systems relative to those two polarities, the negative polarity of the earth and the positive polarity of the sun. If you think of humans, we are essentially designed as tiny little batteries. Remember, we have electrical impulses within us. Every electrical impulse creates an electromagnetic field around it. And that's where that whole magnetic aspect comes in, that polarity aspect of our being. So the way we are designed is actually relatively simple if you think of polarities. We just talked about the sun being the yang with the positive charge and the earth being the yin with the negative charge. And we are suspended in between that. So what that means is that in order for us to stay on earth, to be attracted to the earth, to experience that gravity, the bottoms of our feet have to be attracted to the earth so they can go, they can attach very steadily to this planet, which means that the bottoms of our feet have a positive charge, which allows us to essentially do something like this with the earth, right? And the tops of our head, on the other hand, have to have a negative charge so that we can receive and interact with the positive charge that comes from the sun. So if you think about it, Earth has a negative polarity. Our positively charged feet attach us to the earth so that we're steady on the surface. We feel grounded, we feel present, we feel here. And then from the tops of our heads, that negative charge over here attracts the positive charge that comes from the sun so that we can connect to that other source of energy, which then brings in that more yang aspect of the energy into our bodies. So you've got yin coming in from the bottom, and you've got yang coming up from the top. And they flow directionally. Yin flows from the bottom up, yang flows from the top down. And they meet and they exchange information. And that directionality, that duality of the way in which energy flows is relevant to all of the energy systems in our bodies. For example, we have meridians that have that directional charge to them. We have yin meridians that pull up energy from the earth. They are those streams or rivers of energy that go into the earth and pull up all those beautiful negatively charged electrons into our bodies. They bring that energy from the bottoms of our feet up the front of the body, which is the yin part of the body. It's the softer part of the body that we need to protect more, and bring it up into the torso, bring it up into the core of the body to nourish us. And then we have the yang energy coming up from the sun. That's that positive charge that we receive through our negatively charged heads that comes in and runs along the backs of our bodies, which is the yang side of our bodies. It's the tougher part. It's the part that is able to withstand external influences. If you think of animals, and you imagine a human acting more like an animal, being on four legs, if you will, that outer part that is exposed to the world is the yang part of the body. And the inner part that sort of is more protected is the yin part of the body. So the yang meridians will pull that yang energy coming from the sun into our bodies, all the way down the back, and bring it again into the core of the body and run it off the bottoms of our feet. So those are the ways in which that yin-yang energy manifests in our body. And because energy has that directionality, it has that impulse to move, it needs to be able to do so. It needs to have the ability to maintain that proper flow of yin energy and yang energy. However, our lives sometimes or oftentimes will get stressful, and we will be exposed to situations that will cause our meridians to lose that beautiful flow of energy that they naturally maintain. And that tends to be one of the classic ways in which the body tends to get, the body's energies tend to get disrupted. So those energies, the meridian energies, when they start getting disrupted in some way, we have the opportunity to establish balance within those meridians again. We have the opportunity to restore that natural flow and bring them into balance again. You can work, and we will learn more about this if you're interested in specifics. We will learn how to work with individual points on those meridians, how to trace the meridians themselves, how to tap certain points, how to find different ways to bring them into balance and restore that natural flow of the yin-yang energy into the body. Another way in which the body's energies can get disrupted is through the disconnection of that flow of yin-yang energy that we just discussed, whereby we simply get disconnected from the earth. And this little magnet trick where, our positively charged feet attached to the negatively charged earth simply stops working. And again, that can happen for any number of reasons. We live in a world that doesn't really allow us to spend a lot of time interacting with the earth and nature the way we used to in ancient times, which allowed us to stay connected to that natural flow of energy. Today, we spend the bulk of our time in offices and homes that may be pretty far from the actual earth, from um, the actual soil that we can put our feet on. Even when we go outside, oftentimes we'll wear rubber soled shoes. We'll find different ways of essentially creating a barrier, if you will, between those energies that need to naturally leave the body and move into the earth. Those are the yang energies, and then the yin energies that find their way through our body to feed us. So because of all of these changes to our ways of life, along with the endless amount of stress that we're all subjected to, oftentimes what will happen is we will find ourselves ungrounded, where we cannot receive that nourishing energy from the earth, and we cannot get rid or clear out the excess energy that we may have accumulated from the sun. And when that happens, people often feel like they're not fully present. They have a hard time with being here and now. They find themselves anxious. They find themselves spinning into an endless loop of what I sometimes refer to as closed circuit TV loop, where the same thoughts and the same patterns are constantly present because we don't have our natural way of discharging what is excess, what is too much, that which we need to recycle into the earth, and getting fresh, juicy, yummy energy back up into our system from the earth. There are some very, very simple ways to address that. We can simply spend some time with our feet on the ground, barefoot. We can go and put our backs against a tree and feel what that connection is all about. We can simply grab a stainless steel spoon and rub the bottoms of our feet to get that electromagnetic flow going again through the iron that's contained in that stainless steel. All of these are incredibly simple and incredibly effective. And when we are able to restore that flow of the natural energy, that simple balance, again, of yin and yang, because at the end of the day, it is a balance. It's not about yin or yang being more dominant. It's all in the unity of those two. Then we get back to a place where we feel balanced, we feel healthy, we feel happy. Now, one more thing to know about energy is that energy also likes to move in patterns. Energy has very specific ways in which it likes to move. We already talked about one of those. The directionality, for example, of the meridian flow. There is also another way that is very, very fundamental about the way in which energy likes to move, which is essentially crossing over patterns or crossover patterns. Energy has this tendency to like to weave, and we are designed in this fashion. If you think about the way in which our brains function, right side of the brain controls left side of the body, left side of the brain controls right side of the body. And that connection between the two sides of the brain controlling the opposite sides of the body is really, really fundamental. It's facilitated by the corpus callosum, which integrates that information, including visual information. Another example of that is the medulla oblongata, which is a butterfly-like structure in the brain between the spinal cord and the actual brain. It's on that stem. Assists us with getting all of the different types of information crossing from the stem into the brain and vice versa. And a lot of the structures actually look like the physical structures look like these crossovers. They have these pyramidal tracts within that as well that also are essentially crossovers of different information pathways. So our physical body is designed to have those crossovers. Even if you look at DNA, that double helix, right? It's basically this spin, this little stair case, if you will, that's spinning around that contains all the information that we need in order to be here and to fully be who we are. So that is a very, very fundamental pattern in the way our energies move in the body and in the way in which they interact with the world. And those energies have to continue to do that crossover in order for us to stay healthy on a long-term basis. Now, from time to time, for example, let's say if you get sick, if you have had surgery, if you are trying very intensely to learn something that is very difficult, from time to time, those energies will actually stop crossing over and start going in parallel, because that is the most direct path to success, right? However, once that specific event is over, let's say you have gotten better, your surgery has now completely resolved whatever problem you had and you have healed from it, and you have learned that difficult piece of information that you really needed to absorb with a lot of intensity, those patterns are supposed to go back to crossing over. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And if they don't, and they stay into this parallel track pattern of movement, what happens is something that was adaptive at one point now becomes a maladaptive function of the body. And when that occurs, and the body integrates that as a new habit into its field, it becomes very difficult for us to go back to the way we were before and to feel like we're functioning at 100%. Because basically, when our energies are running in parallel, they're forcing us to function at less capacity than we are if we're fully integrating everything in our worlds. And that is intentional because the body has to focus on one specific way of being. However, after that need has passed, we need to go back to where we were before. And if that doesn't occur, we feel less than optimal. We may feel foggy. We may feel extremely exhausted. We may feel like life is dull. I have no inspiration. I am not feeling like anything is of particular interest to me. And in those situations, it is typically the energies that have simply continued that pattern that once was adaptive, but now is no longer so. And we can assist them with energy medicine and some simple exercises into going back into the original pattern that they were intended to follow, which is that crossover pattern of weaving right and left into our bodies. So with that, I hope that you have gotten a good understanding of the basics of what energy is and the ways in which we might be able to influence that energy. I hope this has been an interesting and educational component, and I would love to hear more from you. And if you're interested in signing up for classes, please do so on my website, and I look forward to speaking with you soon.